I am live. It is Monday, the 17th of March, 2025, and I am reading Prelude to the Landing on Planet Earth. It's a wonderful book about a journey of a trio through the Middle East preventing a war, guided by the management, a group of extraterrestrials, of who Tom is the speaker. We are now in chapter 7, and I think it's the 7th reading, I'm not sure, but this is the last reading of this chapter. These phenomena don't seem to end with me, Lyle said. They involve my family now. He had recently met his brother Andrew after a separation of some 10 years and had found that he was working in South Africa with another person named Walton, serving as channel and holding communications with alleged extraterrestrial contacts. I believe he's been in contact for about a year, Lyle said. It is more than that, Tom said. It is since the 3rd week of your August 1971. He is in communication with the civilization of Aragon. I have recently met Andrew Watson, and he confirmed to me that it was in the second half of August 1971 that his communications began, and also that the actual name Aragon occurs in them. Jim Hurtak, John's eccentric erstwhile guru from California, a man with his own extraterrestrial contacts, who had regaled his students at the California Institute of the Arts with reports of his conversations with contacts with names like Enoch, Maitreya, and Metatron, learned from Tom that he was from Altea. This I have known, he said. Yes, Tom said, and have you known that those from Altea are those of what you call Atlantis? This has been told me, Jim said, because of the knowledge that is within your soul and because of who you are. You have great ability, Tom told him. But remember that you are dealing with a physical planet that is caught in heaviness. It is important that you find a way in the language of the people with whom you communicate to speak in terms that they may clearly understand, for they understand not in the abstract as you do. You must bring your knowledge into focus for them. You have come a long way, and with your help and with the three, the message that must be communicated to the nation of Israel will prevent massacre and catastrophe. I should like to ask the meaning of the golden wreath that is to be laid in Israel, Jim said, referring to something that had come through one of his own communicators, and that nobody present understood except, apparently, Tom, who answered. It will be when the nation recognizes from where it comes and the reason for its existence. It means that only when the people of Israel become awakened and aware can this planet be saved. Jim Hurtak and his wife were to remain at Sinning while the three were away, and Tom said that Jim should be the spiritual leader of the group, should ensure that the meditation and prayer sessions were conducted properly, and that nobody participated in them while they were in a negative frame of mind. He gave elaborate instructions for the operation of a proxy system to ensure that each member of the support group of 6 should be present at every session, either in person or by proxy, and that each of them should find on the hillside behind the house a small stone, put it in a box and carry it on their person for a short time to imbue it with their energy, so that if no personal proxy were available, it could be used in the last resort. Are we to understand that the stones will be the equivalent of the Urim and Tumim to be directed to the vehicle of Kishon? Jim asked again, using terms that nobody understood. Yes, Tom said, but remember that there is also one in this area where you are now, and it will be directed to that, and from that it will be directed to Kishon. And it will also go through the subterranean areas and perform a complete circle. Do you understand? Yes, thank you, Jim said. When it was Colette's turn to put a question, she said, I am very disturbed by a channeling I did in January concerning certain visions about Israel, which still haunt me. Can you tell me if I am to eliminate them or if they are still pertinent? Tom answered this with a display of Socratic virtuosity. It is important you understand that there is knowledge released in the universe that many civilizations have access to. Let us give you an example. If you were in this nation and you went perhaps to an Oriental nation and spent some time there and then left and went, let us say, to Brazil, and if in the 3 nations you visited you learned only a portion of the language, you would only receive a portion of the information released. Do you follow this? Yes, I do, said Colette. And do you understand that the civilizations that exist within the universe are all physical civilizations? Yes. And that those that are physical have emotions? Yes. And that perhaps at times the emotion is misguided? Yes. To return to your question, we ask you to eliminate these visions from your mind. And we give you the reason why. Your power, and you have got power, as all in this room have, is a special power. And if it is misused, which it may be in error, and not deliberately, or if a fear is caused within you, this power may then be used by others to create a situation. There are those that exist in the universe that would like each of you to have a fear within you, so that your power then may be misused. Remember, your power is the type of power that is not in balance, but that, if it is not in balance, may be used by either the positive or the negative. And what we have said to this lady, we say to each of you, Tom concluded. Neil Hitchen next asked a number of questions and received answers that were significant for him personally. And when the visitors had all their say, Andrija had a final question to ask. In the last week, he said, we've had many things happening in the house here that cannot be explained scientifically, like clocks going backwards and forwards, coins and things appearing and disappearing, events too innumerable to mention. Now, are we to assume that this is your work or that of one of the civilizations? You asked for proof, did you not? Tom said. Yes, Andrija said with a laugh. Well, thank you. We've had a lot of proofs. If we had given you but one, Tom said, you would have said it was an accident. Before concluding this already very long chapter, I must add a brief note on Yuri. Though he was not directly involved in the work during the period covered by this book, there are frequent references to him and to his state of mind and heart in the communications. Since he had ceased working with Andrija, he had often repudiated his extraterrestrial connections and confessed himself as mystified as anyone as to the nature and origin of the paranormal powers that he now exploited chiefly for publicity and entertainment. His critics, stage magicians like James Randi and Milbourne Christopher, mounted a fairly successful campaign to demystify him in the eyes of the general public and expose him as nothing more than a very clever conjurer. The effect of this was further to discredit Andrija's claims for the cosmic connection as published in Yuri. In the communications, Tom continually maintained that Yuri really belonged with the group and might eventually return to work with them, but he had to concede that the management's first modern age protégé and harbinger had rather failed in his mission. The reason, he said, was that he had succumbed to the hazard that threatened all beings that came to Earth, attraction to the physical, and also because the civilization that had programmed him for his mission on Earth had given him an excess of ego. All is not lost, but all has not gone according to plan, Tom said apropos Yuri on the 7th of November 1974, and he urged that it was very important that John and Andrija should carry to fruition a plan they had to get together for a conference, all the scientists who had worked with Yuri. The conference was held at Tarrytown, New York in February, and John put up part of the funding necessary to bring physicists from all over the world. An assurance was given to the participants that there would be no reporters present and no publicity, and that the purpose of the conference was simply to enable scientists who had worked with Geller to share their experiences and discuss their ideas about them with professional colleagues. This exchange of views and experiences would, it was hoped, serve both to validate the Geller effects to an influential scientific minority and to encourage members of that minority to speak out publicly. Some have spoken out, but rarely to an audience so large as Yuri's most energetic critic, James Randi, has frequently been able to command on television. And when Professor John Taylor of London presented his researches and views in a televised Royal Society lecture and debate in September 1975, the attitude of the majority of his audience was skeptical, even hostile. To this day, a majority of the general public probably believe that Geller has been exposed, so the following brief report on a number of the Tarrytown Conference contributions is relevant, if only to redress the balance of evidence put forward in what should be an ongoing public debate. Geller's ability to bend spoons by stroking them is well known, and has been apparently duplicated by some of his conjurer critics, but his effect on the unusual metal alloy nitinol is not so well known. It was reported to the conference by Alden Bird, a scientist at the Naval Surface Weapons Center, Silver Spring, Maryland. Nitinol is known as the metal with a memory, for when it is heated it immediately remembers and adopts the shape in which it was originally manufactured, no matter how much it has been twisted, scrunched, or bent. To erase the memory and give a piece of nitinol a new shape, the metal has to be heated to a temperature above 900 Fahrenheit. Bird reported several experiments in which Geller had succeeded in producing a kink in a piece of nitinol wire that had been manufactured in a straight configuration. In the first experiment, after the kink appeared, Bird put the wire into boiling water, but instead of snapping back into a straight shape, it developed a right angle bend. Even after it had been re-annealed into a straight shape by having an electric current pass through it until it was almost molten, the nitinol wire, when it cooled, developed the kink that Geller had formed in it. Bird confessed to the conference, "At present, I have no scientific explanation for what happened. I can say that the possibility of fraud on Geller's part can be virtually ruled out. Because of the unusual properties of nitinol, the scientific controls essential for any investigation are, for the most part, built into the testing material. Geller would have had to palm a source of high heat or substitute his own personally manufactured or previously altered pieces of nitinol if deception is to be the explanation of the event that took place, two highly unlikely possibilities." Another expert on metals who contributed to the conferences was Dr. Wilbur Franklin, chairman of the Department of Psychics at Kent State University, using an electron microscope to study fractures produced by Geller in 2 spoons, a needle, and a platinum ring. Dr. Franklin discovered that these do not always have the characteristics of normal fractures produced by fatigue. On the platinum ring, which had fractured in Geller's presence but without his touching it, the electron microscope revealed 2 fractures only 1/100th of an inch apart, and one of these resembled a cleavage that would normally occur at a temperature of -195 degrees Celsius, while the other appeared to have occurred at platinum's melting temperature of 1173 degrees Celsius. Dr. Franklin concluded from his observations that the evidence based on metallurgical analysis of the fracture surfaces indicates that a paranormal influence must have been operative in the formation of the fractures. Ronald Hawke, a scientist at the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory of the University of California, reported observations of a quite different kind of Geller effect. He set Yuri the task of erasing or altering the magnetic programs stored on cards, used to feed information into a computer. The magnetic patterns encoding the information are stored in a layer of iron oxide, which has a protective covering of plastic. A computer will reject a card if the information patterns on it are ambiguous. 2 cards, which Geller attempted to influence simply by lightly stroking the plastic surface, were accepted by the computer before he touched them, but rejected after he had done so, and subsequent inspection with a magnetic viewer revealed that the magnetic patterns had been changed. 2 English physicists, Professor John Hasted of Birkbeck College, University of London, and Dr. Edward Bastin of Cambridge, reported personal observations and a series of controlled experiments with Geller. In addition to metal bending phenomena, Yuri produced, in their presence, 2 other paranormal effects. Firstly, he caused an acceleration in the pulse rate of a Geiger counter, and second, he apparently caused a dematerialization event. The latter was a quite unexpected occurrence. The experiment was designed to test whether Geller could alter the atomic structure of crystals of vanadium carbide, a substance as hard and brittle as thin glass. The crystals were sealed in pharmaceutical cellulose capsules and were placed on a metal plate. Hasted held his hand over the plate, and Geller slowly moved his hand a few inches above Hasted's. Suddenly, one of the capsules gave a little jump. It was quite intact, but when it was opened, they found that the crystal disc within it had not only fractured, but half of it had disappeared. It could not have passed through the wall of the capsule, which was undamaged, nor could it have been removed by anyone. It had simply dematerialized. Both Professor Hasted and Professor John Taylor of King's College, University of London, in addition to working with Geller himself, had studied the Geller effect produced by children and others whose paranormal abilities had initially been activated by watching Yuri on television. Their reports on their observations and on controlled experiments with the children were substantiated or given greater credibility by a long report by a South African parapsychologist, Dr. Alan Price, who had conducted a painstaking field study of the Geller effect among the South African population during and after a month's visit that Yuri paid to the country in July 1974. After checking and screening hundreds of reports and eliminating the dubious ones, Dr. Price ended up with no fewer than 137 cases that he judged to be entirely authentic. The few contributions to the Tarrytown Conference that I have been able to summarize here are certainly enough to show that Yuri's powers are immensely varied and quite genuine. Whether they are a gift with which he is endowed by virtue of his extraterrestrial origins and connections is a question that the most scrupulous validation of the phenomena themselves leave unanswered, and probably the most we can reasonably say is that the phenomena are so bizarre that the evidence for their authenticity diminishes the improbability of the idea that the energy involved is channeled rather than generated by Yuri. In a communication on the 7th November 1974, Tom said of both Bobby Horn and Yuri, "At different times they were both given opportunities on Earth, and if they had succeeded, they would then have become heads of civilizations. But because of their attraction to the physical, they were never successful. When the three of you volunteered for this mission, the two of them begged to come back also, because they realized it was important to overcome their failures, and they were sure that with the help of the three they would accomplish this. But, as you see, they are both again trapped in the physical. However, there was still hope that Yuri would eventually return to work with the group. He had the nature of his people, was mercurial and stubborn, but, like the nation of Israel, he would yet be made aware of his true nature and purpose, and Tom cautioned Andrija, John, and Phyllis not to write him off prematurely. He said, "You do not bury those that are breathing." And it says here, for full reports of the investigation of the participants and of other scientists who have studied Geller, see the Geller Papers, Charles Panatti, Hookton Mifflin, Boston, 1976. So, next chapter is 8, entitled Walking on Eggs.